Hey, how's everybody doing? Woo. Sick. Cool. Hey, what's up? My name is Scott Tolinski. I am the co-host of the Syntax Podcast. It's a podcast I do 3 times a week with Wes Boss. We talk about JavaScript. It's pretty sick. I'm also an executive producer over at Sentry, where I get to work on Syntax full time. In fact, we're doing a lot over at Syntax right now, beyond just the podcast. We have a YouTube channel and a lot going on the website, so check it out at syntax.fm. So, what am I going to be talking about today? Well, we're going to be taking a look at some real demos, and all of these demos run entirely on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's no frameworks, nothing, no build steps. These are going to be looking at new or potentially underutilized browser APIs, some of which you've probably seen before, some of which maybe you haven't, and maybe you didn't know you were able to use them today. So again, all of these demos, they can be loaded directly into Chrome, no build, no framework. And in addition to that, after I show you a new API, I'll be giving it a ship score. And that ship score is either going to be, you should check it out now, something you should be aware of. You should try it now because it's really coming down the pipe. Or you can ship it. You can ship it today. So I have a lot of demos and another QR code for you. So I had so many demos for this talk, I couldn't fit them all in the slides. And not only that, I didn't want to spend too much time on the code itself. So I'm going to breeze through a lot of the code, but we're going to talk a lot about the APIs themselves. I'll have this available at the end of the talk, too, so I'm going to tab forward. You can find it on my website, tolin.ski, as well. So have you ever built any of the following UIs? A modal, a menu, a mobile nav, a drawer, accordion swiper, a slideshow? I would imagine so. These are the types of things that we build all the time, right? And typically, if you're building one of these things, you might reach for your JavaScript framework, right? I know me personally, it's really easy to have a state variable and just toggle that state variable, throw a little animation on it. Next thing you know, you have a modal, right? But, you know, another thing we might do is head to npm install and bring in who knows what into our application. It could be anything. So the first one I'm going to talk about is modals, alerts, and dialogues. And the first demo we have here is just a basic modal. Now, this is using the dialog element in HTML. You can see it is still using JavaScript. In fact, most of these demos will still use JavaScript. We're just going to be using less JavaScript. And so all we're doing here really is some query selectors and calling show modal. Next thing you know, we have a modal. Now, what's so cool about this is it applies inert to your page, so you automatically don't have to do the overflow hidden trick to prevent scrolling. It also gives you keyboard shortcuts, so you can hit escape to close it. But in addition to that, it captures your focus, so you can just start typing right away. All of these accessibility things that we would typically have to code ourselves. But not only that, we hardly have to write any JavaScript to get this working. And you can use these techniques exactly with React, Svelte, Vue, Solid, anything. You can use these techniques, right? It's not beholden to just vanilla JS. So the dialog element. Could you ship the dialog element today? And are you shipping the dialog element today? Yes. This thing's available in 96% of browsers. And I didn't tell you this, but each time we get to ship it, I'm going to have a breakdancing GIF. This guy is the Olympic representative for the Netherlands in the Paris Olympics 2024. His name is Lee. So this is your Olympic representative. He's really good. All right. So you might have seen 96%, thought, all right, 96%, not 100. But a lot of these things are never going to get to 100, and if you see something 96, 95, anywhere in there, as long as it's supported by the big 3, you can imagine that it's most likely shippable. And you know, many of these things even have polyfills if you need to support further back. But I would imagine a lot of you are shipping Grid today. Grid only has 97.25 if it's unprefixed. Prefixed even 97.7. So getting into that 97, 96% range is pretty good. So if we wanted to animate this, we could bring in Web Animations API or WAPI. And if we open this, you can see we get a nice little animated dialog. The Web Animations API is pretty simple. We're just toggling a couple of values here. I'll stop moving, sorry. You just toggle a couple of values. Then you call this .animate method. Next thing you know, you have an animation. In fact, this demo has 0 CSS. Well, it has some very basic CSS to apply to make it look pretty. But the animation, the positioning, all the important things will work with no CSS here. And you get all of that through the Web Animations API. Now, this is one I'm sure many of you are aware of. But if you aren't, the Web Animations API is extremely well supported and has been around for a bit. This guy's name is Menno. He is the other Olympic representative from the Netherlands in 2024. But you can see this one goes back, 84, Safari 13.1. So Web Animations API, it can save you from having to import a whole animation library. Now, I like animation libraries. I use a lot myself. They can make things really easy, magic transforms and stuff. But sometimes you just don't need one, right? And even less of needing one is the View Transitions API. I know Fred talked about this a little bit earlier, but you can see the JavaScript in this one is even a little bit less. We're mostly handling the close and open events, and we're just basically calling document.startTransition. We're wrapping that in, and we're just calling dialog.showModal. Check it out. That's it. Nice little fade in. I'm not sure if the FPS is getting that, but it's a nice little fade in that you get. That's the default style. I did not apply any CSS to this transition. By default, you wrap something in a start view transition, you get a fade. It's pretty sick. So the View Transitions API, can you ship this today? It's 72%, but I'm going to say ship it because this API is actually pretty easy to work around if you're not animating. So for instance, if you want to do these animations, you can do them, and many of these things will still work. In fact, a lot of the automatic transitions that you could get from the View Transitions API kind of fall back to nothing. They just don't animate. And if it doesn't support, it doesn't animate on the browser it doesn't work on, hey, that's fine. They did announce actually just this week or last week that it's coming in Safari 18 officially, so that's great. We'll have it there. Cool. So you can also do this with CSS. In fact, this is all the JavaScript we need, and check this out. We still get the same escape key. Everything works. It still captures our keyboard. And this time, we don't even have to program the animation on fade out when you hit the escape key. With the other options, you're going to have to do that. And this is being done with a couple of really neat APIs that you'll see a couple times in this talk today. This is being done with one, Allow Discrete. Allow Discrete to me is kind of one of the coolest things coming to CSS. It allows you to transition display none, which, I mean, that's the kind of thing that we used to use jQuery for, to slide in, slide out. Now you can do it with CSS. And likewise, there's another new API here, Starting Style. Starting Style might be one of the most interesting ones to me, too. This API is essentially saying, what is the style of something before it enters the DOM? In React world, you might have had like React transition library that applies a class to something and then it quickly applies another class, and it does the transition that way. Same thing when it's animating out. This is basically that, but in CSS. You don't have to write any JavaScript to do this. And I'm not against writing JavaScript, by the way. I write a lot of JavaScript. I think if you can let the browser do it, as Bruce said, let the browser do it. So Starting Style, one of the most exciting new APIs. Can you use this today? Sadly not, but you should try it. It has been in Safari since version 17. You'll notice Firefox is going to be the one lagging behind in all of these. But you should try it, because I think this API is really neat, and the fallback for it's nice and easy if you don't mind not having it animate. That's Vin Diesel, by the way. Yeah, seriously. OK. Next one, Allow Discrete. Allow Discrete, not even close. So this is one we're going to want to check out. It's very exciting, but we're just going to have to check this one out for now. Be aware of it. It's coming. All right. This section's really super interesting to me, menus and popovers. So a basic popover looks like this. There's no JavaScript here whatsoever. The CSS is only used to make it look pretty. Nothing's doing anything. Check this out. Pops. And not only that, gets your keyboard. You can immediately make this accessible. You hit escape key, closes. This thing works. No JavaScript. You have a popover. What's really interesting about this is it puts it on something called the top layer. The top layer sits on top of everything else. It has its own context. And therefore, you never have to worry about z-index. There is no z-index applied to this element, none whatsoever, and it will always sit on top of everything because of top layer. In addition, you can get some actual controlled actions with this. So with this, you can say popover target action show, popover target action hide, and get a little bit more control over it than just having, whatever the default toggle is, right? And that all works. So can you use popover today to toggle a popover with no JavaScript? Yes, you can use this today. 96% global usage. It's in every browser. This guy's name's Pocket. He's from South Korea. He's really good. Look at him go. Holy cow. All right. So if you want to get into animating these things, this is where it gets a little bit more tough. But not only that, there's a fatal flaw with the top layer that we haven't necessarily talked about. And the thing with the top layer is when you add something to the top layer and you want to position it relatively, you can't position it relatively because it's in its own context. So if you wanted to have it sit underneath another item, let's say you're building a literal menu like what we're doing here, you usually want it to sit underneath that button. And we can't necessarily do that. So the way you approach it now is with JavaScript. So I click this, you can see it's here. If I scroll, it stays here, works really nice. I get all the keyboard accessibility shortcuts that I want for this. The only thing I'm doing here that's really interesting is I'm calling an update position function with get bounding client rect. I'm running that on resize and rescroll. And then I'm doing a basic animation with the Web Animations API. That gets us there pretty good. It's quite a bit of JavaScript compared to what you might write in your JavaScript framework. It's not bad, though. In fact, I wrote a svelte action for this exact thing to anchor it, and I can just tuck it all nice and neat underneath that action. So could we do this whole thing with CSS only? Check it out. Hit that. We get the animation. We get the everything that we want here. No JavaScript whatsoever. That's a menu. How many times have you ever built a menu like that with no JavaScript? I have not. So you can do that with another new API called Anchor. And Anchor, you first set an anchor name. You give it a name. Then you tell the thing you want to anchor how to use it. So you say, I would like the top to anchor to the bottom. I would like the left to anchor to the left. Pins it up nice and neat. It's a really cool API. In addition, we're also using starting style and allow discrete. These are two really key APIs that are going to be coming to the browser soon. So, Anchor, can you use Anchor today? No, you can't. But this one is in wide discussion right now. In fact, the reason why it's not in every browser is because I think there's a little bit of a disagreement over how much the API should cover. But it's implemented in Chrome if you want to at least give it a try and get used to it, and then have JavaScript as the backup for now. Next time you know, when it's out, you can use this thing. So let's get into some interesting things here with the mobile nav in drawers. So this is a version with the Web Animations API. This is a slide-in navigation. This is being accomplished through the popover API. And in fact, if we didn't have any animations on this, this would just work if you just wanted to have this pop in. But since I wanted the animations, I threw in the Web Animations API and made a nice sliding mobile navigation. But once again, you get the keyboard, you get your focus, you get the escape key, all that stuff. And likewise, you can do this with view transitions with the same API. Look at that. You get the exact same animation with view transitions. The only difference here is that we give it a view transition name. Then we do the transition in CSS. And really what a lot of this stuff is it's offloading things that we do in JavaScript that we're having to ship to CSS that we don't have to ship. And what's cool about this is that we have this keyframe slide, and all we have to say to get this animation working is from translate 100 VI. The VI unit here is viewport inline. That's, if you've ever seen VW for viewport width, that's basically the same unit if you're thinking in a logical property way. So 100 VI in a top to bottom, left to right is the same as 100 VW. And because we only have to say from, you just reverse this animation when you have it leave. So the View Transitions API is really versatile. You can write some really intense CSS animations and transitions with this thing. And you can do this all with only CSS as well, using those APIs that we talked earlier. Allow discrete starting style. These things are going to make an endless amount of these UIs that you build all the time. You don't have to have a single JavaScript toggle to ever toggle a mobile nav again after we get these APIs. And likewise, a drawer can be done with the dialog component. It could also be done with popover. But a drawer, this is kind of like the GitHub one. You can just see how much is accomplished with this stuff using just CSS and HTML, a tiny bit of JavaScript. OK, accordions. Accordions are not that exciting. I'm going to be honest. You have a basic accordion here. This can be done just like this, details and summary. This works by wrapping a summary tag in details, and then you automatically get this working accordion. Can you use details and summary today? Heck yes, you can. We're getting into single-digit territory here with Safari supported this since version 6. So this thing is extremely widely supported. A lot of people can use this, and so much so that I almost pulled it from this talk because I was like, this one's kind of boring. But on my flight here, I pulled up Delta's website, and it's a bunch of divs and buttons. Why don't they use detail and summary? So I felt like people still need to hear this. All right, you can animate this with WAPI as well. I don't know if anybody actually calls it WAPI, but I'm calling it that right now. And you get this nice sliding animation. This is probably the easiest way to animate this today without a framework or an additional library bringing this on. If I was animating this thing, I'd probably use a library. But this is just using the Web Animations API. The reason why this JavaScript is so much here is because we wanted to make it cancelable. But other than that, really not too much going on. The HTML, as you can see, is hardly changed, just the details and summary. View transitions are kind of out for this one because you're not going to be able to get that nice slide feel until we get the starting style and allow discrete properties. So CSS only. Now, this should work. It's using allow discrete and starting style. There's no reason why this shouldn't work, and it works one in every 10 times. Hey, you might not have seen that because of the FPS, but it worked. Every subsequent time, it's kind of working sometimes. I don't know, this feels like a bug to me because the code's there. But again, if you're animating this type of thing, this is where you reach for a JavaScript library. Swipers and slideshows. These are things we build all the time. In fact, Instagram is like the entirety of Instagram is just little swipers. Or if you wanted to buy a syntax basketball, you could do some swiping, right? And these things work really well, but we often reach for JavaScript for them. In fact, let me hit, there we go. And now we get a swiper that works and functions very well. And actually, this one feels really good on your phone, too. And this is using no JavaScript whatsoever to build this swiper. And you'll see it functions just kind of like what we're used to. And this is being done with the scroll snap API. Really, the important CSS here is scroll snap type X mandatory here, and as well as scroll snap align start, where we're snapping to the start of each slide. So scroll snap, can we use this today so that we don't have to build swipers with JavaScript? Yes, we can absolutely use this today. It's been around quite a while if you aren't using this thing. By now, scroll snap can save you from a ton of things. And not only can it save you from a ton of situations where you wouldn't want to write JavaScript at all, it also makes working with JavaScript in certain ways easier, right? We have indicators as kind of a common thing that you have with these swipers. You just sprinkle in a tiny little bit of JavaScript in here. Next thing you know, you have these working indicators, but it still functions the same. I still get that nice smooth scrolling and everything like you'd expect. The only difference is I'm running an update function here each time I want to update this. And likewise, you could build the classic style slideshow with this thing. And again, this functions the exact same. Not only do we get the buttons and the indicators, but we can get the nice easy swipe, and it just works. That way, again, it feels nice for your mobile users, and it works really well with the browser. And the amount of JavaScript we're having to write for this is extremely minimal. I'm essentially just calling a slider.scroll and using the behavior smooth to make this thing, just updating the position on it. Again, you can check out all the code for these demos. And this thing works extremely, extremely well. Cool. So Again, I had a lot more of these demos, but I was going to go over by a tremendous amount of time. So if you want to check out all these demos, I have each of them. In fact, most of them, what they do is they run through varying degrees of how much or how little CSS and JavaScript you have to write for each. But there's a ton of demos up here, again, if you want to make sure that you can check those out. Every single one of these demos you could load up in a browser, Chrome, in only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it will work. So thank you so much, and that's all I got today.